Hello and welcome back to NoBS. Today we're with a very special guest, a friend of the show, a good buddy of mine. Mr. Reagan is joining us to talk about some hot topics of this week. Reagan, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Great to be on the show.
Yeah, man. Good to have you. Good to see you again. It's been a little bit a while. We've done a few videos together before. We've always stayed in touch. First off, how you been? What's new over there on the Mr. Reagan channel?
Oh, I'll tell you what, everything's great. And the reason it's great is because everything's so terrible.
Yeah.
Right? You've got all this crazy stuff going on in the world, but it gives you so much, stuff to do videos on. It's like we're what do you call it? Like an embarrassment of riches.
Yeah.
I would rather things be boring and maybe have less stuff to do videos on. But it's not bad for the channel, even though we're getting crushed by YouTube. I wanted to say, if your viewers, because you got a lot of viewers that don't subscribe to your channel, I think I have the same. I mean, I do the same thing. There's a lot of channels I watch. I don't subscribe. I would like to ask your subscribers. I didn't tell him that I was going to say this ahead of time, so he's probably like, shut up.
Here we go.
If you're not subscribed to NoBS, but you like to watch his show, I implore you to subscribe and to hit that notification bell, because I'm finding some of my videos, they're only going to subscribers.
Yeah, you were right about all the topics and craziness and 2020 just going out of control. And then in addition to that, just it seems like there's some kind of shift, like people aren't getting the video. If they are subscribed, no one's getting recommended it. There's all kinds of shifts in there. So make sure you are checking out that subscribe button, checking out both of our channels, NoBS, Mr. Reagan. We both have great political content. We have lots of
that's a good point. Forget hitting subscribe on his channel. Hit subscribe on my channel.
Yeah, hit both of us up. Let's be fair. Let's spread the
Move
love.
over to Mr. Reagan.
And,
no.
Before we get to too much promotions, though, let's go ahead and show them what we got. Let's give them a little taste.
Yeah,
let's give them a little sauce, So we're going to talk about a few topics today. I got a few comments on a tweet, and we're going to talk about some other stuff going on. First things first, let's go ahead and jump in with a Joe Biden discussion. Joe Biden has been a big topic. I know you've done a few videos about him. I know everyone's talking about the gaffes, the goofs, the funny stuff he's saying. He just can't even, I'm going too much. I don't need cognitive test. Oh God, he's just like a total mess. So what's your first thoughts on that and where it stands right now?
Well, he recently just said something like, there's no such thing as diversity amongst black people in America. And oh man, I mean, he's his own worst enemy.
Yeah, there's no wonder he's getting hidden and like put off to the side, and he's canceled everything too. Like we could talk about goofs all day, and then we could talk about everything he's canceled. He's canceled press conferences, rallies. Right. He's not going to the convention. Like, what do you think about conventions this year?
Well, I'm really unhappy about the fact that we're not having a convention. In fact, I tweeted out a proposal that we do something like Woodstock, right? Where we do an outdoor convention. Everybody sleep in tents, right? We go out to some national park like Mount Rushmore, something like that. And we all sleep in tents, and we all just camp for a couple of days.
Let's put a stage right on top of George Washington, man. No, I thought about that too. I've seen a few options. I don't know.
Because we're outside, right? We can social distance as far as we want.
There's a way to do it. And the thing that first comes to mind when you say that was like, there was the Dave Chappelle method. Like he had a comedy special a couple months ago, and they showed a little intro in the beginning. They had people drive out to this big field. They had the tables all separated. Right. The workers were properly like PPE'd. And you could do it. There's a way to do it.
I say, let's just hold the thing without any kind of safety measures, but just call it a Black Lives Matter rally. We'll have the convention. We'll call it a Black Lives Matter rally, and then all the Democrat mayors and Nancy Pelosi and everything, they'll say, "Oh, that's okay. You can't spread coronavirus if it's a Black Lives Matter protest."
Yeah, you got to call it a protest. That's what I was going to say too.
I want to go back to Biden for 1 second. Have you noticed that everybody on the right, no matter what show you watch, no matter who's talking about it, everybody on the right is basically desperate for Biden to debate, and we're all terrified that he's going to refuse to debate. You're in a good position. You're in a good position politically, that your candidate has an advantage, when the greatest fear amongst your people is that he won't get to debate the other guy.
I know. They're already coming up with exit plans. I mean, if Biden won't go to the convention, which I think is weird, that was another thing I wanted to backtrack to, was just, if he's not going to convention, is he going to Skype into the convention? Like, that's going to be a first. He's going to hit the Google Hangouts for the convention. I know those are all dated platforms. What is it now? Zoom? Everyone Zooms the convention.
The greatest fear that we have on the right is that
Yeah,
is that
the
there's that
debates.
maybe Biden will try to slide out of the debates, which is terrifying because you need that juxtaposition. You need to be able to see Trump next to Biden, Trump, expressing himself in somewhat coherent sentences, and
be nice.
Joe Biden, yeah, exactly. And then Joe Biden really not able to express himself coherently at all, which is typical. But nobody's watching his YouTube videos. Everybody on the left is talking about Biden. Nobody's really watching Biden. It's those of us on the right who are laughing at him and watching the clips.
And we're like chomping at the bit for the debate. And I think that comes back to, I mean, obviously Trump is a talented debater. Obviously he started to really shine in his performances live on stage, not only with his Republican competitors in the beginning, but his debates with Hillary were epic. I mean, you would be in prison. Like everyone still remembers that line.
Yeah, because you'd be in jail. Yeah. And everybody just starts laughing. Like, my favorite bit was when he was asked about his offensive comments about women, and they go through all this big list of offensive comments, and he goes, "Who's the chick that he hated that had her own talk show?" Rosie O'Donnell. He goes,
Rosie,
he turns he goes. She lists off all these things, and he goes, "Only Rosie O'Donnell," and just killed. Like everybody was just dying laughing.
He had the biggest Rosie feud. And then the reason I think I forget is she's totally disappeared. Like she's not on The View anymore. No. I don't know what she's doing anyway.
Because she's crazy. She's like a crazy person.
That's besides the point. The debates will be exciting. I'm really hoping that they happen. I know that Trump also pushed to have like a fourth debate. Like they wanted to start sooner. I think they're trying to press Biden, they're like, let's get him out. Let's get him out of the closet. Let's get him out here and playing with the big boys. And yeah, I just think it's going to fall apart. And I just can't imagine because, okay, so back to the, we said 2016, he nailed Hillary in those debates. And Hillary is actually, I mean, as much as you hate her, like she was obviously more competent than Biden. She could stand on the stage. She could speak. She had a lot of experience. I mean, Biden has years of experience, but it hasn't helped him at this point. I guess he's just too old at this point. I almost feel sorry for the guy. But yeah, I mean, it's like not going to compare. If you could take out Clinton, like Biden's going to be like playing in the minor leagues.
It is weird, right? That Biden is their candidate. It almost seems like too good to be true.
Yeah.
It's like there's so many people that they could have brought in that would have been more exciting, more competent, and better. I mean, pretty much their entire lineup of potential presidential nominees back when they were all campaigning in the primaries, they were all pretty terrible. There was nobody that I was really afraid of. But I'm confused by that because I do feel like there are competent Democratic candidates out there, Barack Obama types who, maybe I disagree with politically, but who I think are, potentially a solid campaigner, somebody who you might say, okay, they could go toe to toe with Trump. Yeah, there's got to be some people out there, but none of them were.
But I mean, we're all looking. Everyone's looking. I guess if there were, they didn't want to do it, obviously. So they ended up with Biden.
It is surprising to me. I mean, it's kind of like being an actor, right? Everybody's like, "Oh, I need to have range. I need to be, I need to envelop myself in the role." Not really. What you really need as a compelling actor is just being charismatic. If you're a charismatic person, people are going to want to watch you on screen. Right. Yeah. And yes, you have to be competent. Yes, you have to be able to be believable in the role. But much more important is that you're very, very charismatic. And sadly, it's kind of the same in politics. Yes, you need to be competent. Yes, you need to know what you're talking about. Yes, you need to do well in the debates. But what really separates the men from the boys is the candidate who is able to inspire his base, is able to get people excited and thrilled and laugh and have fun. Trump can do all that stuff. Joe Biden...
Not so much. With that said, I want to tag one thing on to what you were saying. You're comparing them to actors. And I think it's the perfect point to bring up the fact and the idea that politicians and politics is just kind of like Hollywood for ugly people. It's like, it's very similar. And that's kind of, I think, goes along with what you're saying. It has a lot to do with performance, convincing dialogue, like getting an audience on your side. It's like stand-up comedy in a way, like stand-up or like performance like that. So with that said, I think we could move on to our second topic, which is related. Now we're going to go to the actual Hollywood. So we're talking about politics, Hollywood. Now let's get to the real Hollywood. We're going to talk about a few movies and stuff like that. I know you've done a few movie videos on your channel as well. We both tend to dabble.
They do terrible though. I can't say, my people don't care when I do movie videos, but I love talking about movies because it so affects the culture, right? It really influences young people and directs them toward voting in a particular way, believing certain kinds of political philosophies, and it can be incredibly damaging, I feel, if you got the wrong messages coming out of Hollywood.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we that's why we talk about it a lot here. I think I'm in an opposite situation where
you are.
People tend to like my movie entertainment content more, but we're also in a sticky situation this year where there's no movies coming out. There's not a lot of entertainment. I mean, we still get to the news when it happens. There's always going to be an actor saying something dumb or some kind of protest or something. But today what we're talking about, and this is actually a pretty good moment because there was a recent announcement for Captain Marvel 2. Captain Marvel was a big kind of groundbreaking movie last year. You know, love it or hate it. I know there was a lot of tension, like people on both sides. I know this channel, we talk trash about it a lot because it was just very woke and feminist and it had an actor.
Yeah, I think it's your favorite movie to hate in the whole world.
Yeah, it's there. And now that they've announced Captain Marvel 2, we'll get to more details about that and what you think. But right before the beginning, like, what did you think about the movie? Did you see Captain Marvel 1? Like, are you following the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Yeah, I am. And I did. In fact, I think I watched it at least in part because of your reviews. I love watching your Captain Marvel stuff.
Okay, thanks.
And it was absolutely amazingly woke. Yeah. It was astonishingly SJW.
Impressive.
It was impressively so. Yeah, impressively so. It was so in your face feminist and, you know, man hating that it was like it was actually somewhat surprising. It was pretty unbelievable. And the thing is, you could actually see as a writer. So I'm a writer. I came to LA to write. I was totally unsuccessful in the sense that I couldn't get anybody to read my scripts. It's very hard as a straight white man to convince anybody to read your scripts in Hollywood unless you are friends with some people or your dad works here or something like that, right? Because it's a lot of nepotism here. And then if you're not related to somebody or know somebody, then they want to bring in black people or women or gays or something like that. So I was at a huge disadvantage coming here, which I didn't know. So for years I was sort of, spinning my wheels doing nothing. But because I've written a lot of stuff, prolifically writing things to try to get people to read that nobody would, I have a pretty good sense of the motivations behind writing certain scenes and, writing certain things and why a writer might put something in. And it's pretty obvious. I don't even think you have to be a writer to see the reasoning why they are creating certain plot elements.
Yeah.
Right.
The whole reason they made this movie in the first place was to add into a greater cinematic universe. They wanted a female hero. They wanted that feminist icon. They wanted to get woke. This had happened the year before with Black Panther. That was their black movie. And then they went on to the girl movie. And then, breaking down, like, keep going on what you were about to say. Like, the scenes had it, in each scene, you could see that motivation for sure.
Sure, and it's not to say that if you have a motivation to express a certain political view that you can't write a good movie. You can. But I do think that a lot of times writers fall into a trap of being so focused on expressing certain ideas. They allow those motivations to actually destroy anything of value in terms of the quality of the writing. So in this particular case, they wrote Captain Marvel as a Mary Sue, and I think that you've discussed the Mary Sue archetype previously in your work. But the Mary Sue
girl can't do no wrong. She always gets everything right. It's like really easy for her.
Right. There's this, and it was originally written, I think, as like a parody type character, but this became sort of common in feminist, fiction, where you have a character who literally is invulnerable, right? She has no weaknesses. And in this movie, it's the same. There's no real difficulty for Captain Marvel. She starts off pretty much awesome and I guess suppressing her power because of the dominance of
some mind trick, like they erased her memory. I know there was some part of that. I haven't seen it in a while, but yeah, I think I could totally see that. And I think what you're getting at too is the problem is, like, when a movie, it's okay to have themes and, it's great to have like a good message here or there, have some kind of like motivation, inspiration from like current events is cool, but it's all got to be done like very delicately and like snuck in almost to make a greater movie. But this movie, it overshadowed it and it was just all about it. You're just like the whole time, you're like, it's like they could have put a I would say like, what do they call like a watermark on the movie, and it just said feminism is good, and it should have just had a watermark over the whole movie, because that's how it felt like watching it, you know.
Well, yeah, I you know, all characters to be compelling need to have some kind of weakness. You need to want to root for them, right? A lot of times you make characters an underdog character. A character like Superman, you can do well, but you need to give him weaknesses. Like Superman has a couple of obvious weaknesses. The first one is obviously kryptonite. They put in kryptonite because it made him vulnerable. It was a good way of making him vulnerable. Yeah. But they also give Superman his love for humanity. He wants to protect innocent people. He believes in the goodness of humanity, and he wants to protect humanity. And that becomes very difficult for him when, you know, these bad people are trying to hurt humanity. He feels like the protector of mankind. And there's all these really interesting dynamics with Superman. With Captain Marvel, it's just like she's more awesome than everybody, and she's a woman, and therefore, you know, we need to celebrate that, and you're not allowed to criticize it. Yeah, and it's cringy, and it
compares to Superman too. Like, I mean, she's not an alien; she's a human that goes and gets alien blood or something. Like overall, it's like similar. It's like this something comes from space. There's a superhero.
It's a total Superman ripoff. In defense of that, a lot of Marvel characters are just ripoff of DC characters.
The main point is, with the girl power stuff, it gets really annoying and it's been overdone. And with Captain Marvel, I think the last thing I'll say as far as critiques, because since we've gone over this over and over, but the one thing I hated was the fact that they made her not hot. I know that sounds tacky. It sounds like a dude line, but like it was just so lame to me. I'm like, why? Like, because Brie Larson can be very pretty, and I've seen her before in other projects, and she was like a hot chick. And then in the movie, like they make her all just like boxy, like they give her this weird suit, and it's just
okay. Look, I'm just going to agree with you right now. I've never found her attractive in anything she's done. She looks a little tomboyish. She's just not my type. I'm not saying she's ugly. She's not ugly, but there is this. I was actually going to make a video on this. I never decided to do it. I was going to make a video called "Beautiful Women Can't Succeed in Hollywood," right? And the concept was basically that if you look at any of the more, you know, the lead characters in movies today, there are almost no really stunningly beautiful women. I mean, in the 80s, you had a ton of stunningly beautiful women. I mean, Michelle Pfeiffer, I can't remember all the names, Sharon Stone. You had these in the 90s, the 80s,
just
women.
10 years ago, I mean, it's not even like that long of a development. Like, it's just like the last 5-10 years when this PC culture riled up. It's like pretty girls are like ostracized now. Purposely make even girls that could be pretty, they're dumbing them down. And the funny part about that, to go back to the Superman comparison, is that doesn't actually go both ways, because they still have Superman at being hot, and like, you know, Marvel has like Thor and he's all ripped up, Captain America, you know, like they're still about the dudes. But
hot guys can do well, but hot girls, they're out. Because feminism, I guess.
Right. And then the other thing to go into the new stuff about Captain Marvel and the old, because this is something you mentioned before. You're talking about writing, talking about how it's tough to get work if you're like straight white male is just like the lowest rung of the ladder right now. But there's also, you know, female, like we were just talking about pretty females, like white pretty females are like a next step up. They're a little better off than us, but you know, and this isn't us playing a pity party. We're just calling it like it is. It's just
it absolutely is true. Yeah,
it's just the way it is. And then back to Captain Marvel, it shows with their choices too. Like, not only did they pick, like you said, like Brie Larson isn't the prettiest girl in the world, so they picked her on purpose, you know, like she's got that tomboy thing. And then they also picked like a female director. They're like, we have to have a female director. And Black Panther had to have a black director. And then now, from what I hear about the new Captain Marvel, it's a new girl director who has like no experience. Like she's got nothing going for her. Like,
okay, well, let me tell you a secret. Let me tell you a secret about Hollywood right now that nobody's really talking about. And I haven't, and I don't know this in terms of like, I don't have documentation or anything like that. I can't prove it. But I've been hearing this from a variety of different people around Hollywood. There are still working straight white men in Hollywood as writers and directors, but the way they're working is as ghostwriters and ghost directors. So instead of, it used to be that's right. So they'll go in, they'll direct the whole thing, and then some female director will get their name on it, or a black director will get their name on it, or whatever, or on the script. same thing. So now
think
you've got
that
this
might have
weird
happened in Captain Marvel as well. Like, sorry to cut in, but
in the old
like,
one, in the
original
first
one, it had a guy and a girl. Like, it had two team director, but they tried to play up the girl. But now that you say it, I'm like, she was probably just getting him coffee.
That's exactly what's happening. You're not allowed to be a straight white male director in Hollywood anymore. Yeah, but if you're a new guy, I mean, even somebody like Ryan Johnson, I mean, I don't know even how he got his job. He must be gay or something. But
Well, dude,
yeah, a
I
lot
would
of these
say that's why he had to make his movie so woke. Like, that's why he had to like really pander to feminism. Like, he got it, but he was like, he had a shackle. Like, I mean, this almost sounds like I'm defending him. I mean, he still copped it. He still kowtowed and caved in, but it's like,
he just basically did anything Kathleen Kennedy said. That's the rumor.
That actually makes sense, especially when you explain it like that. That's kind of a new light on the Last Jedi situation, because it's like, straight white dude, how did he get this job in 2017? It's like, well, if you think about what he did with that job, it's like he pretty much did everything he could to say, I'm cool, I'm one of the good ones.
You know, here's a proposition that I have that I've discussed with my friend Kurt before, but I've never really talked about on my show. It's a very, very risky thing to talk about. I have a theory, well, not a theory, but I have a proposition. What if it's possible, I'm not saying this, I believe this necessarily, because I don't think I do, but let's say, for instance, it's possible that straight white men, for whatever reason, tend to be the best at a particular job. I'm not saying that it's true for sure, but I think it's possible.
Well, dude, it's okay. Yeah, we've said this before, actually. Like, it's not... I mean, I feel you. I know you got to be careful.
Well, I'm not saying that it is for sure true, because we obviously don't have a meter that can determine this stuff.
It is what's happening, though. That's what I was going to say. Like, there's not really, it's not all what if. I mean, we're already in a capitalist society. We're already having free competition. Everyone has equal opportunity.
Which, by the way, I've worked in Hollywood a long time, and I can tell you that straight white men get shafted pretty much across the board.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what position you're in, you will always be overlooked for a woman or a black person or a gay person or something like that, because Hollywood does believe that straight white men have the advantage and all these other people are marginalized. And so at least in Hollywood, and I don't know about any other type of industries, at least in Hollywood, straight white men are incredibly disadvantaged because of that.
Yeah, it happens in a lot of woke places. I mean, there's a lot of other industries in California. Big tech has that issue. People have talked about Google hiring and firing for similar instances. We've seen promotions and pictures of like people bragging about their company's composure based on race, and you'll see them be like, oh, look at us, we don't have any white people. You know, it's like, that's just something that people brag about. So we've seen it before, and it definitely is true. And then last thing on that is just, we already have a competitive system that's getting the best people to the top. It's capitalism. I mean, Hollywood, if there were these kinds of other directors out there, like, they act like there's these secret female, black, gay directors out there that no one knows about. But it's like, no, if they were out there and they made their work and got themselves a job, they would move up to the top if they could make the studios money. You know, that's how it works at the end of the day.
I wish that were true, but I actually don't think so. I actually think there is a lot of control in Hollywood about who gets what job and whatever, but it's mostly nepotism. And I don't necessarily think, I think it used to be a little bit more based on merit, like back in the 70s, back when like Spielberg got his, start and people like that. And now everything's very tightly controlled. It's just a very small industry. You have way too much supply and way too little demand in terms of the number of people directing and writing. And so people can just basically control who they want to pick for what. And so there is a lot of control, but I don't think that Hollywood, as far as I've seen, I don't think Hollywood was ever specifically racist or gender biased toward white men or straight white men or anything like that.
It just happened to have more of them. It's just, that's the way it fell out. Like, if you've ever been to any kind of thing like this, like, I went to college, I took film classes, like, I've studied this stuff in courses and stuff. Like, you just see that more white dudes end up working with cameras and signing up.
It is a strange thing, but there does tend to be a desire by men to go into these fields more often.
Yeah.
And I did have women in my classes when I was in film school. This is going to sound really brutal, but they did tend to be the worst. They made the worst films. They just didn't have a knack for writing good stories or producing good films. I'm not saying women can't be good writers. I think Jane Austen was amazing. There's some genius, brilliant female writers. But for whatever reason, when it comes to actually making films, it does tend to be more difficult for women. I'm not really sure why.
Yeah, I know. I understand. It's just the way it goes. And if you think about other jobs, like other career paths, they attract certain other people. Like if you talk about basketball, you're obviously going to get a lot of black people. Rap music tends to get black people. You could talk about nursing or teaching that attracts women. You know, there's certain fields that attract certain things, and you wouldn't call any of these other things racist. Like you wouldn't say, "Oh, there's a lot of Jewish lawyers." Like, is that racist? It's like, no. Have you ever looked up a lawyer? Like, it's like half of them are Jewish, and it's because they're good at it, and they tend to.
Why are so many men garbage men?
You know, it's like, it just happens. Every job has it, but the real problem is they're going after the ones that are dominated by straight white men, but not all of them. Like you mentioned, garbage men, or you could talk about ditch digging or construction work or the military. But really, it's like, no, they want the nice, cushy office jobs, like at a CEO position. They want like a director position. Like they go right for the top. You know,
nobody ever complains about not getting into the hard labor jobs.
Yeah, they're not like, oh, I want to be in Hollywood. Like, we need more lighting guys in Hollywood. Like, I want more women hanging the lights and running cable. And like, there's tons of jobs on Hollywood sets, but it's like all you hear them talk about is lead actors and directors. And it's like,
okay, so you know they got the same issue with the race question. Right? The race question is like all races, all cultures. We need to believe that they've all accomplished the same kinds of things throughout history. Like history's being erased now. I'm doing a video about that soon, about how there's this Afrocentric. Have you heard about this Afrocentric history analysis where they're trying to
I've heard a few things. Yeah, I've heard a few things.
It's really weird stuff. They're like, oh, the ancient Egyptians were all black, and you know, the Greek culture was developed by blacks, and Chinese culture was developed by blacks. And
we tend to call that the we was Kangs argument.
The we was Kangs. Yeah, that's where that comes from. It's Kangs. The weirdest thing, man. I mean, it's like they're going in and they're saying, no, history is not what was recorded, it's what we say it is. And then there's all this like it's literally pseudo history. I mean, it's fake history.
The craziest thing is like it sounds a little creepy and weird like when we talk about it, but it's like this just came up. Like Nick Cannon was preaching this stuff on his podcast like a month ago. Like we're not making it up. This isn't like old news. I mean,
that's kind of related to the Nation of Islam stuff. That stuff's even weirder.
It's
that's
the
like
same like realm though. It's like they're talking about the past and they're like, oh, we were in the past. They're like, oh no, that wasn't Jewish people. That wasn't Egyptians. Those were black people.
They're saying the original Jewish people were black. I mean, there's all this weird stuff where they're trying to say, oh, we have to equal out how we look at history. It's so 1984. It's like insane. We have rewriting history. And the same thing goes for jobs. It's like, well, men and women need to have the same representation in every single job category. It's like, and this is what I say about both of these things. Why can't we just appreciate and respect the fact that there are different cultures in the world, there are different races, and they do have differences. And instead of saying, well, if we acknowledge those differences, then there's going to be hierarchies and people are going to hate each other. And it's like, well, that's okay to me because you know why? Because that also comes with a respect for the differences and the beauty of the diversity of the differences. And this to me is true as well about different kinds of groups of people being more interested in different kinds of jobs. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with certain kinds of cultures or certain kinds of genders monopolizing certain jobs if they happen to be really amazing at it for whatever reason.
It just happens to fall that way. We're just dealing with reality. We're not trying to like fix things and be polite and like, oh, I don't want to offend this person. Like it's no, we're not doing that. We're just talking about we can look at the TV and watch the NBA and see that it's a lot of black dudes. Like that's cool. They're great at it. I love watching basketball. You know, the same thing kind of happens in football, except for, of course, like the quarterbacks tend to be a lot of white dudes, and
which is weird, right?
Offensive, you know. It's like they try to act like, oh, there's more white coaches. It's like, well, what about the cornerbacks? You know, like no one's talking about the offensive line being 90% black. It's like no, they call out the quarterbacks and the coaches. It's like it's insane.
But you know, this all goes back to something called critical theory, right? Which is this Marxist, like a legit Marxist thing. The Marxists decided that honestly, like the whole left is Marxist now. The whole Democrat Party is a Marxist platform.
They preach it, and the BLM says they're all about it.
Yeah, and their whole idea is it is not unify people. It is legit to divide people, right? They are trying to divide black people and white people, men and women, gays against Christians, Americans against immigrants, Muslims, all this kind of stuff. They're trying to divide everybody, whereas the conservatives really have a party based on principles. The Republican Party is based on principles. Not every Republican is a good person, I don't think, but for the most part, we're a principles-based party, and therefore, if we have kind of like, we apply our rules and our ideas and our ethics universally. Whereas Democrats, they're not a party of principles. They're a party of groups. They're like, we want to favor this group and we want to go against this group. We want to help this group and we want to fight this group.
They're not about treating everyone the same. It's like this
no, so they have different rules that apply for everybody. And this all goes back to critical theory. The idea behind critical theory is there is no really truth about social. Like, nothing about our society is natural. It's all constructed, right? They have these things called constructs.
Yeah, I know,
where they say, you're right, where they say, oh, if men are, typically executives, that's because certain men in power decided that it was better for them if things were that way. Well, but no, it isn't really. It's never really better if white people control a particular industry or men control a particular industry. How is that better for me? Right? If I am an executive at a company, why the hell do I care if other executives are men or they're white or whatever?
They're profit driven. They're driven about success and doing the best, and they will put in whoever does the best.
All right. Well, it doesn't make any sense, and you're 100% right. It's all about capitalism. Capitalism doesn't discriminate in the same way. It discriminates based on merit. It doesn't discriminate based on any other qualification. Now, there are people on the left that will say, oh, if somebody says that we need to, this needs to be merit-based, that's also racist. It's like, what are you talking about? They're like, well, if this race on average does more poorly than that other race, then that means that if you say something should be merit-based, you're for the race with the more competent people and you're against the race with the people who aren't so successful at this, or something like that.
The thing I was trying to get at before was, you reminded me with the construct thing, because it goes back to like one of the famous ones is that race is a social construct. Like, that's something that they push. And it's just so contradictory, because it's like, well, if it's not real, they're saying it's not real. And then it's like, well, you focus on race all the time and you say, black people are oppressed and white people are privileged and this and that, they have all these angles, but then they say it's a social construct. And then, you're talking about these other constructs. It's just all of them add together to just a lot of word games, like a lot of double speak. And it's just the mental gymnastics they have to pull to like justify this poor logic and ideology, the Marxism.
It's sort of like just pretending reality isn't real, just for this.
It's silly. It's like a silly non sequitur. And it's also just more word games. Like, that's what I think about is like, okay, they're just saying race is a social construct. Race doesn't exist. Well, we still have people we call black people. We still have people in our country that we call white. We still have ones we call this and that. Like, you could call it race. You could call it a group designation. You could call it whatever. Like, they're just playing these word games, because it's like, you could say we're all the same, whatever. And I get what you're saying too. That's a great idea. Like, if I was still a hippie type, I would be like, oh yeah, peace, love, and everyone's the same, man. All right.
We could all probably to some degree go in on that lie. And I don't think that it would hurt the world that much. The problem is that, I do think that in like the 90s, a lot of people did kind of say, I'm colorblind. That was like a thing where they would say, okay, let's just kind of pretend that we're all one people. But the problem is then things shifted, because basically people on the right, I think, have been for a very long time, like, whatever people want to say about racial stuff, we'll just go along with it. Like, if you want to say we need affirmative action, okay. In fact, Republicans started affirmative action. If you want to say we should be colorblind, that's fine. We'll go along with it. But every time they would acquiesce, there would be a new set of rules that would come in, and it would push it in a different direction. So much so to the point where eventually Republicans and people on the right just said, okay, fine. We'll all say we're colorblind, even though it's ridiculous. We'll all say we're colorblind.
Yeah.
And then the left said, okay, how do we get out of this? We've gone so far that we've convinced them even to pretend race doesn't exist. Now what are we going to do?
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you say you're colorblind, you're a racist. And in fact, black people need more than everybody else because X, Y, and Z. Now they have become the identity politics people. They're completely focused on identity politics, even though for a long time they said, we got to pretend that there are no races. Now that's all they talk about is the differences.
It's a total shift to the other direction. And the last thing I'll say, because I think we're getting close to time and we'll wrap it up. But this reminds me, did you ever see that video? I think it was Ryan Long, and it was like woke versus racist. And it was basically just showing how woke people are the same as racist.
They're the same. Yeah. That's
and
right.
It's like, that's what you reminded me of again, because it was like you said, eventually there was like this colorblind era. I feel like it was like in our time, like throughout the 90s, 2000s, everyone was trying to be colorblind. Race doesn't matter. But at some point it shifted, and now it's like race is the most important thing.
The most important thing.
And it's like, that's how it was back in the day when they called people racist in the 80s, you know, like 70s, 80s, way back. It was like race is the most important thing, and then we got away from it, and now the Democrats brought us back, and it's just a full circle.
Yeah, it's going to be very hard to ever get out of this struggle. I think between the racial thing. I think the easiest way to get out of it is, and this has always been my position, is that I tend to find that in America, white people do not tend to be racist. They've actually, I got a map somewhere that I found recently, and this was published in the Washington Post, about the most racist and least racist countries. And the United States, UK, all the English-speaking white countries tend to be the least racist countries, along with the Scandinavian countries.
I believe it.
And the most racist countries are like African countries, India, places like that, in the Asian countries. And
China's hella racist.
China's very racist. A lot of these places, you know, they have massive wars, genocide, all kinds of fighting between the different groups, massive amounts of racism all over the world. America, white Americans, not that racist, but if you have friends who are black, ask them if if they consider themselves racist, or if they know a lot of black racists who are openly racist, who will say they don't like white people. And I guarantee they're gonna say, oh yeah, most black people are definitely racist, openly racist.
Yeah.
And we have this problem in America where we have spent so long trying to convince white people not to be racist, we forgot to tell everybody else. So we got this situation where at least I've never met an openly racist white person my whole life. I'm 40, but I've met tons of black people who say, "Oh yeah, I have a problem with white people. Like I don't really like white people."
It's just so casual too. And the other thing is that reminds me of is they think it's okay. They're like, it's justified. They're like, no, it's okay if I'm racist. Like I'm oppressed.
Well, but always bad people justify what they're doing, don't they?
Yeah, I know.
Anybody who does something bad will always justify what they're doing.
Exactly.
But they'll say, oh, it's because white people have been so cruel to us, or, you know, white people are racist, so it's okay
Every
if I'm racist.
racist has like a justification. Like the same thing happened with the World War II racism. The same thing happened like during whatever, there's Vietnam, post-Vietnam racism.
But see, I actually think that this hurts black people a ton, and it keeps them disproportionately poor, and it keeps them from getting jobs, and it even leads to more minor things like, well, we're not going to speak proper English because that's something white people do. We're not going to study in school because that's something that white people do. We're not going to wear the same fashion as white people because it's too white. You know, and there is this cultural idea of defining yourself by your blackness as distinct from the rest of white society, and basically forcing a kind of segregation in America. And as long as that cultural ethic persists in black culture, you were never going to have any kind of unity in America. We're never going to mend this gap because it's constantly being the wound is constantly being reopened by this racial animus and this hatred coming from the other side, not coming from white people.
Yeah, and this summer with all this stuff, this BLM stuff, they just threw gas on the fire.
Oh yeah,
and they're just like, oh, it's all on, everything's canceled. It's been a total mess, and it's 2020. You know, we're still trucking through it. We got the election in a couple months. We got plenty of stuff to talk about, as you said at the beginning. And I think it was a good conversation. I think we got through. We're about at time. Yeah, dude, thanks for coming on the show. Thank you guys for watching. This has been an episode of NoBS featuring Mr. Reagan. He, of course, has his own channel here on YouTube. We're going to put a link right below. You can also search Mr. Reagan. Lots of great videos, similar content, but a different flavor to it. Lots of different topics covered on your channel. Specifically, why don't you tell us what's like your latest video, or do you have something coming up?
Yeah, I have a couple things coming up, but the biggest thing is I did all that. I talked about it a little bit earlier. I did all this research into this erasure of history. There's a bunch of politicians in Chicago who are saying that we need to stop teaching history classes because history classes aren't Afrocentric enough. And then I go into the detail of what being Afrocentric is and how it's unbelievable. It's just insane. The whole thing is insane. They want to erase real history and replace it with this fake history. It's actually quite fascinating.
It's more We Was Kangs.
We Was Kangs.
Yeah, it's coming back. So yeah, guys, thanks for watching again. Make sure you check out Reagan's new videos.
And subscribe to NoBS and hit that bell, because we are getting crushed by YouTube right now.
Subscribe to Reagan.
They do not want Trump to win again in 2020.
Yeah, we got to stick together. We got to make this election happen. Everyone have a great day. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.